Good afternoon, everyone. This is the February 15th, 2022 Administration Committee meeting. Would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Long.
I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
Supervisor Cook.
Present.
Supervisor Ard.
Present.
Supervisor Peterson.
Here.
Supervisor Peavy.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. If there are no objections, we will take item 9 and move it to position 5.5 so that we keep all of our agenda items running smoothly. Are there any objections to that? Hearing none, we will move item 9 to 5.5 on the agenda. If everyone has reviewed the minutes from the past meeting of Tuesday, January 18th, 2022, are there any changes, additions? Hearing none, those meeting minutes will stand. At this time, we will entertain public comment. Does anyone have a public comment?
Good afternoon, everyone. By way of an introduction, my name is William Rubin, a resident of the village of North Hudson, specifically 800 Woodcrest Drive North, a resident going back to 1996. I have a request this afternoon. It involves the creation of a county housing authority, and perhaps it starts with a study group or a special committee that would evaluate the merits of such a public body corporate. I'm hoping that a work group can be assembled from several disciplines: administration, health and human services, economic development, community development, elected and non-elected volunteers. Perhaps after convening a special committee over a 60 or 90-day period, they can come to a recommendation one way or another, yay or nay, on the creation of an authority. And in studying this issue, I would envision perhaps some experts being brought in, some neighboring county housing authority, someone like Sean Lenz, the fiscal consultant who knows the hows and the whys and the very nature of county housing authorities. They could provide input. And at a minimum, perhaps the study group forwards a recommendation to create just what I would call the basic infrastructure of a housing authority, having the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, the commissioners, naming existing staff, a person as an executive director. And in doing that, the infrastructure is in place for those occasional opportunities that would come St. Croix County's way. And even at a minimum, having just the infrastructure, bylaws, articles of incorporation, commissioners, if they meet twice a year, gavel in, gavel out, I think that's okay, so long as the infrastructure is in place. And in closing, I'm happy to volunteer my time, and I'm happy to suggest other names of people that would, I believe, be willing to participate in a study group or a special committee if one is created. And with that, I thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move forward on the business items. Ken will present the financial report.
The financial report is the first month of January, so I can report everyone is under budget so far for the year. There's a little accounting joke for you. Tough crowd tonight. We also have the KIP plan, the ARPA report in here, and then also if you look at our tax collection report, we're collecting for the months of November right now. We'll collect December's next month, the month we're currently in. Otherwise, though, everything's remaining on track. 2021, while not on this report, we did finish the year in the black overall for the county. I'd entertain any specific questions that you may have on the financial report, though.
Any questions? Thank you, Ken. Moving on to item number 2. This is the initial resolution authorizing the issuance of $80 million in general obligation government center building bonds, Series 2022A. And Adam will be presenting on this topic.
Get this thing started. All right. Well, thank you, supervisors, for having me. I'm just going to give a brief update on the Government Center expansion project, what has changed since the last time we had talked, and I don't know if we have Sean on. He is on? Okay. And then I'll hand it off to Sean from Ellers to go over some of the updated numbers. So first, I just want to start by going over why there's a need for an expansion to the Government Center. Really, it's looking at the population. So we have, as you may know, we're the second fastest growing county in Wisconsin. The building that we're in was built in 1993. At that time, we roughly had just a little over 50,000 people that were living in St. Croix County. That building was really designed for a 20-year period. Fast forward almost 30 years to our latest census data in 2021, and we're just over 93,000. We are projected to be over 119,000 in the year 2040. So, one second. So as we have more people that move into, that make St. Croix County their home, we're going to see a greater need for the services that the county offers, and we're also going to see a greater need for space to offer those services. So what has changed since the last time we had met? So the big change is the cost. The cost is lower. Well, how is that cost lower? The financing has been removed, and we previously had space marked for the Hudson Police Department. That has since been removed from the project. We had listened to the feedback that was presented at the last county board meeting, and there was some concern over, there was uncertainty whether Hudson was going to be moving into that space. Hudson Police Department was going to be moving into that space. We were putting up the full $87 million for the project, and then we had an additional couple million for the refinancing. Because of that uncertainty, I think some were uncomfortable with that dollar amount, so we have removed that, both the financing and the HPD, from the plan, and we've scaled back the project to reduce the project cost by $10 million. So here we have just some exterior renderings of the expansion. So if you look at the image at the top, the area to the left of the image, that would be an expansion, and the area to the right over here, that would also be an expansion. The area in between those two expansions, that will be renovated space. So we did update the floor plans based off of the feedback. You'll see that on the map over here, we have this kind of beige area that says TBD. That was the area that was previously allocated for the Hudson Police Department. We didn't have the architects redraw up a whole new map because that would cost extra money. Instead, we just marked that as TBD. That's going to be addressed if the project does get funding. So looking at this section, this is highlighting some of the space for law enforcement in our sheriff's office. Some of the highlights for the spaces for the sheriff's office include a public lobby, extra training rooms, evidence labs, interview rooms, increased storage space, and secure parking. We also have additions for our judicial services. There will be additional courtrooms in the new plan, space for children's waiting rooms, dedicated jury deliberation rooms, and more space for the district attorney and victim witness offices. The district attorney's space, if you had done the tour or you had looked at the images that we have posted online, they have some of the smaller space and the more immediate space needs. Courts are also in that space as well. Other government services. So each department would see larger areas to accommodate more employees and to offer more services. The plan includes more meeting space and collaboration space. And we're also very focused on flex space. So right now we have our HHS staff primarily out of New Richmond. By having more flex space and collaboration space, they can bring some of those services and meet the people here in Hudson who need those services. We know that transportation is an issue for some, so bringing services from the ADRC and HHS over here to meet people where they're at, we think would be of great benefit to the community. So the cost, I'm not going to go too deep into the cost. I'm not the numbers guy. That's why we have Sean here. But I did mention earlier that the cost had dropped just over 10 million. So the new projected maximum budget is 80 million. And as the population grows, that cost is going to lower for everyone. So looking at the numbers in the chart below, that represents the initial property tax increase based off the equalized property value. So looking at a house of 300,000, that initial property tax increase would be $129. But again, that would lower over time as our population grows. And like I said before, we are the second fastest growing county. All of this information is available on the St. Croix County website. When we started communicating about this project, we put this page up. This page has been updated with the newest information that I presented here today and the plans, so you can go through and take a look at that. You can access that under the Government tab, or you can type in secwi.gov/government center expansion. I did throw in the vision and mission slide here just because I did want to say that we do address the need for a government government center expansion in the strategic plan. I did want to point your attention to the new signage that we have in the county boardroom, just to remind us all of the vision and mission. And that's all I have for you, and I'll hand it off to Sean Lentz. But before I do that, I'm available to answer any questions you have. No? Okay.
Okay, Sean, take it away.
Great. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Just to double check since I'm virtual today. Okay.
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you, Sean.
Great. I see Ken has the pre-sale report up. And Ken, if you can take it to the exhibits, I think that'll dovetail well into the earlier presentation. Great. Thank you. So with the change in removing the 10 million and pulling the refinancing out, we worked with Ken and county staff on coming up with a new repayment schedule for the $80 million bond issue, paying particular attention to how this debt would fit into the plan with this debt and the existing debt of the county. And so what you see before you now is a full repayment of the 80 million over a 20-year period. And I believe I had mentioned to the committee previously that for a project like this under Wisconsin law for using general obligation debt, the 20-year period is the maximum term. Certainly a facility like this will have a useful life much longer than the 20-year period. Interest rates that we've used for this updated projection are about 50 basis points or 0.5% over the current interest rates in the market. And as was mentioned before, we are still at historic low levels, particularly looking on a long-term basis. But the trend, as has also been mentioned, is upward, unfortunately. So still very attractive interest rates, though, for a long-term borrowing like this. Ken, if you can go to the next exhibit. Thank you. Just to spend a second, I know this is one that the committee has seen before. The green bars at the bottom are the borrowing, total borrowing with this issue and other issues of the county. And the red line at the top is the borrowing capacity of the county. And the red line is very, very conservative right now with a level with no growth expected in the county. And as has already been mentioned, as you know, I'm sure very well, the county has experienced very, very, very solid growth in recent years. So GO borrowing capacity is the lowest cost option for financing a project like this, and you certainly have plenty of capacity to absorb this new project, even with it being a very large size like 80 million. Okay, Ken, if we can go to the next one. Thank you. This next slide represents the last few years of debt levies for the county on the left side of the page in purple. And then as purple transitions to blue, that represents existing debt for the county prior to any new debt, like the 80 million that we're discussing this evening. And finally, the green bars on top of the blue bars are representative of the new issue, and the payments that you see there are consistent with that Exhibit 1, 20-year repayment of the $80 million issue. So you'll see the impact from going a little bit below 6 million up to, for taxes collected next year, closer to a little bit under, but close to 11 million in principal and interest on all of the county's debt, existing debt, and this new issue. The other item I'd highlight, and was mentioned earlier, but just to look at it from a little bit different angle, you'll see the payments when we total up the existing debt and the new proposed $80 million issue gradually fall over time. And this line, kind of the orangish, brownish colored line, is the equalized mill rate for debt for the county. This is a very conservative projection that you see on this particular chart, again, because it assumes no growth in the tax base for the county over which you would spread this existing and proposed new debt. This will provide capacity should the county want to proceed with the final phase of the government center in the future, some capacity to absorb that debt, hopefully without having to increase significantly the mill rate of the county when that potential debt could come online down the road. Okay, Ken, if we can go to the next exhibit. Thank you. So Exhibit 4 on the top of the page is numbers that were alluded to on the previous presentation, but has a little bit more detail. We've looked at the tax impact in two ways for this chart. One is for no growth, a very, very conservative projection from this year's mill rate for debt to next year's projected mill rate for debt. This year, we're at 0.47 approximately. Next year, with the new debt and no growth in the county, the mill rate would go to about 0.90. And as we'd mentioned, on a $300,000 equalized value property, that's an increase of $129. The other option that we used was a 5% growth rate, and that's on the right side of the page. Using that same $300,000 property, that's an increase of about $116. And I should mention with this projection that you see on this particular exhibit number 4, that these numbers are only looking at debt. So depending on the county's decisions relating to your operations expenses and the operation mill rate, the overall mill rate will be a combination of both those operating decisions and the debt at that point when you make those decisions in the fall of 2022. So this is just, again, focused on the debt portion. And to that end, if you go to the bottom of the page, Ken, if you can scroll that up for the group a little bit, thank you. We did want to give the committee a historic view of the numbers going back over a period from 2013 through 2022. So that's the existing situation over that period of time. And then adding the proposed impact with no growth of 0.43 if we round up mills to the $3.11 for a $3.54 total. When you compare that with the county's overall mill rate, and again, this mill rate at the bottom of the chart here is for both operations and for debt, you can see with that impact of the new debt, if we're looking at it historically, other than 2021, 2021, and 22, 20 and 23 are almost exactly the same, 21 and 22 a little bit lower for a total mill rate for the county. But looking at it over that longer stretch of time, you can see that even with the new debt being added, the mill rate does go up, but it's still in line and lower than many of the county's mill rates over that period of time going back through 2013. And finally, on the last exhibit for the committee's just information purposes is a common index used for governmental debt. And again, to reinforce that two things. One is that we're, historically speaking, still in a very low interest rate environment, which is advantageous to a longer term project like this. On the other side of the equation, as you look at the far, I guess is looking at it this direction on the top of the page there, you can see that interest rates are certainly trending upwards, still at a very low historic point, but we do see that trend upward, and expectations are that that will continue throughout calendar year 2022. So I appreciate your patience with me going through the updated numbers, and at this point I'll turn it back to Ken and be happy to answer any questions if the committee has any.
Thank you, Sean. Are there any questions for Sean Lentz? Hearing none at this time, I would entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the resolution. I'll second.
Any discussion? I will add to this in that with the significant number of cases that are coming through our courts and the significant number of persons who are seeking services at this time in St. Croix County, this is the right move to go, and I fully support this project. When we think of court cases, we don't often think of court cases as stopping people's lives, but it does. For every individual who is waiting for a court case to be adjudicated, their life is on hold. It means that with pending charges, they cannot obtain housing. It is difficult to obtain employment. And so we have a great number of those persons in St. Croix County who are trying to get their lives back on track. And for services, bringing services to where the need is certainly the way that the future of social services is moving. And if St. Croix County can be a leader in that avenue, then we should do so. And with the number of persons coming into St. Croix County, which is clearly evident by the current rental and housing situation, being that there is nothing available, we are certainly growing, and we need to meet that need. The building project will be one avenue of meeting that need. So I fully support this project. Kara.
I do have one question. First of all, I also fully support the project. I think it's unfortunate we didn't move forward earlier this month with it, because I agree we need to expand this building to provide the services to our residents. I had one question. Obviously, the $10 million is a reduction based on the Hudson Police Department piece being taken out. It seemed like there was a good opportunity there for collaboration and potentially to save some money for our constituents, and also increase that efficiency of cooperation between the entities. Is there a potential option still? Is there a window open still in the future for that kind of project to move forward? And if so, what steps are we taking to continue that conversation?
Yeah, I think the change with Hudson PD, what we did was, under the previous proposal, we had the assumption that they would be in, and we were still negotiating the details behind that. With the revision, the assumption is that they're out, but it's only an assumption, it's not carved in stone at that point. But it does put more of the burden on Hudson then to come back to us and ask to be included in the project. So we are still having conversations with the mayor and the city administrator.
Any further discussion? At this time, we'll vote. All in favor, please sign by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on, we will move on to the resolution amending the 2022 budget. This is number 2, and Ken will be presenting on this.
Yeah, real easy. This just moves it from starting the project in '23 to starting the project in '22, and it reduces the scope of the project from the $87 million to $79.5 million, which would be the available resources for the project.
I'll entertain a motion on resolution amending the 2022 budget.
I'll move to amend the 2022 budget as indicated.
And I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Okay. Chair Peterson will take the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. It passes unanimously. Item number 4, resolution approving alteration of supervisory district boundary, City of New Richmond. This contains numerous parcels. Our county clerk, Cindy Campbell, will be presenting.
Thank you. In 2021, the City of New Richmond enacted an ordinance to attach property to the City of New Richmond from the towns of Richmond and Stanton. There are 5 ordinances attached. We were made aware of it just about a week ago, so that's why it's on the agenda today, to get it straightened out for the spring election. All of the parcels that were annexed cross a county supervisor district line, so either the city would need to create a new ward or have the county board alter the line. In the packet, there's a description of the parcels that were annexed. There are no electors in any of the parcels. I could say the first one listed, there'll be townhomes built on that, and that's a 3.5 acre parcel. The second ordinance listed, it's a 13 acre parcel, and that will be commercial property. The third ordinance listed is 60 acres, and there are no electors, and there are no plans to develop at this point, and that's the one that's in the town of Stanton. The fourth parcel is also 60 acres, and there are no plans to develop at this point. And the fifth parcel is another 60 acres, and there are plans to develop, no plans to develop at this point, but anticipate development later this year. And this is the information I received from the city clerk. And this resolution requests that you alter the county supervisor district lines for these parcels.
How will altering those supervisory district lines affect what we currently have in place?
Well, there's maps in there. There's a significant change if they're 60 acres. And 3 or 4 will add development or residence. Either if it's not done, then it stays in the current county supervisor district line, and population would also affect that county supervisor district after development, and the city would need to create or have another ward added to their current wards, and that would create another ballot style for spring elections.
And if I could, Cindy, so the issue with the wards and stuff is usually about the population. And since these are all coming in at 0, the population distribution is going to remain the same. As they develop though, over the years, that's when the population distribution can start to skew, but it'll be reevaluated every 10 years on the next census. So it really depends on how fast they get developed to how fast that the ratio of representation gets off. So you might actually know that better than us of how fast they're going to develop.
Right, and I'm looking at this thinking at 3.5 acres, and they're doing townhomes. So that would be roughly 12 townhomes on 3.5 acres. And townhome generally being 3 bedrooms because they're marketing to families. So essentially, you're looking at an addition of 24 electors to Ward 6 in Richmond and County Supervisory District 13 for the county, because it's been annexed in. Is 24 electors enough to skew a margin within the supervisory districts?
No, there's a it
Because,
varies.
so I'm looking at the second, Derrick Investments will be commercial property, so there will be no electors on that property. The Patterson property and the Casey property certainly are farmers, and they have they're not going to develop probably for generations, if ever, because of the egg business that they have going. Powers and Stenseth, and since we don't have any idea what they're anticipating on developing later this year, I would imagine, given the location of that property, they're probably going to look at some type of a housing development, which would be consistent with the zoning in New Richmond.
Can I get a question there, Chair?
Please do.
So if we, is it probably fairly certain that the numbers wouldn't skew that much, would remain in the percentages that community development had? And if they got out of that, they'd be realigned anyway in the next census. And my assumption would be that it shouldn't get that far out of skew by the next census, but that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
And I should mention that I worked with Joe Ayers in community development on this, and he said they had intentionally left those districts 12 and 13 a little bit lower, knowing that New Richmond is growing and expanding in population.
John? Lost audio. We could do charades. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you at least see my mustache? Do I need to get closer to the camera? We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by. How about now? Are we back yet? All right,
I hear
we're
you.
back.
I can hear.
Everyone can hear. Supervisor Cook.
Obviously, I'm not as familiar with the area as Supervisor Ard, but it seems to me that right now there are no electors in these districts, so the impact that we're looking at right now is zero. The city is asking for this to reduce administrative burden for the elections, is my understanding. And the districts will obviously grow, but I know when we did redistricting, like my district this time grew significantly more than 24. I mean, like the fluctuation was more. So I think that we can probably address those concerns going forward. So from my perspective, I would be in support of this request. And I can make that a motion if that is appropriate at this time.
We'll entertain a motion at this time.
I would move that we approve the resolution approving the alteration of supervisory district boundary, City of New Richmond, with the parcels included in the resolution.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Long. Any discussion? Further discussion? Then we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, consideration of establishing county clerk vacancy process. Ken will be presenting on this.
All right. So County Clerk Campbell, thank you for all your years of service, Cindy, has provided notice that she's going to be resigning prior to the end of her term. So this is a county board decision to fill that or to call a special election. We have typically filled these vacancies, as our county treasurer Denise remembers. In 2017, we followed a similar process. So I've laid the process out for the county board to take action. Sort of the one odd part on this, though, is I wanted to start the advertising for this opening prior to the county board able to take formal action on it, just so that we can meet a time frame that we can actually get somebody on board by the time Ms. Campbell is done with her term in office, or her time that she's provided for us. So we're starting early. That's really the only thing in here that's odd. Otherwise, it's a recommendation of the process to the county board. They'll have to approve this process. And even if we start advertising and they want to do a different process, we could always pull that at that point. And then the other piece that needs to be done is that subcommittee, really who is the hiring committee that you want, unless you want all 19 county board supervisors sitting in on it. That's what we need to establish, is who that interview group, that subcommittee is going to be. And I might suggest, I didn't put it in here at all, but I might suggest the 5 standing committee chairs and the county board chair. We used that recently for the county administrator hiring. That turned out really well, I thought anyways. So I might recommend that group.
Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor?
Motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll entertain a motion first, please. Getting ahead of myself.
I'd move to approve as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please sign by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And as we did add an agenda amendment, moving item 9 to item 5.5, this will be the resolution adjusting wages in the Clerk of Court's office. And Tara will be presenting on this.
Good evening. So the reason that the Clerk of Courts is not included in the compression study is because theirs is not, as it says in the summary, really related to compression from hiring from the outside, as much as it is, or from internal, I'm sorry, but it is from being able to bring people in at a wage that does not supersede, and we haven't done that yet, but we are having a market compression. So it's not compression because of the people we've hired. To clarify, it's because we can't get people in unless we were to create compression. And so for that purposes, we are recommending treating their wages a little bit differently. So we would like to, there's a list here of the different steps to add to each of the existing staff, where this would then allow for the to be hiring people in at a wage where they will accept it. We have had several offers made since November of 21, and we have not had any accepted. And the primary reason is either they're getting counter offers from their current employer, or they're just straight out saying no because of the wage. And so this will help them be able to bring people in without creating the compression that they're trying to avoid.
Any discussion on this?
I'd like to add just a quick comment, if I may.
Supervisor Long.
I had a recent conversation with Supervisor Fiedler on this particular issue, who chairs the Public Protection Committee. And he gave me some examples of some of the impact of some of the things that they're running into. So, and it was very concerning, quite frankly. So I would really, I think this is the right thing to do, because we need to fill these positions. So I would definitely be in favor of addressing this sooner than later.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to point out the fiscal impact, because you know that's what I'm about sometimes. So it has a cost of $41,214.16. It's an annual cost projected out for these increases. The absorption of the cost for the remainder of this year is relatively easy for the department, because they have so many current vacancies. They're saving a lot of money that way. So it's not a current year fiscal impact for their budget that would be of any concern, but it does add those costs to next year's starting point for the budget. I just want to point that out so you realize the fiscal impact of the decisions that we make.
I'd comment too if I could, Chair.
Please do.
Okay, we'd be nearsighted, for lack of a better term, if we don't keep up with these things, then it's never easy to say, okay, it's going to cost some money, but if we don't, it's just going to be more later, and we're going to have a more difficult time bringing folks in. So I fully support it.
Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move to approve as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor Long? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And moving on, we will move on to the resolution establishing elected officials' wages for 2023 to 2026. Ken will be presenting on this.
Yeah, so the two positions that are up for re-election this year will be the county sheriff and the clerk of courts. We have to set the wages prior to nomination papers being circulated, so now is the time of year that we need to establish that. I did an analysis of all of the wages in Wisconsin for both the sheriff and the clerk of courts. I attached those data documents into the packet, but I really focus primarily on like-size counties in size and complexity of departments that we have compared to other counties. And looking at that, it looks like we have a little bit of catching up to do. So there's a 9% increase for the sheriff and a 7.5% increase for the clerk of courts. A little bit different skew. One of the other contributing factors on the sheriff's was internal comparables. The chief deputy is actually making more than the sheriff this year. So he needed a little bit higher of an increase to create that compression issue that we have there. And then the final 3 years, because we're establishing rates for the next 4 years, I have a 1.5% inflation factor built in each of the final 3 years.
Any questions or discussion? I would entertain a motion at this time.
I would move to approve as presented.
And I will second that motion. All in favor signal by aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 7, resolution amending the wage grid. Tara will be presenting.
Thanks. So as with the other compensation topics that we're addressing, we feel like this will help us with our recruitment and retention, as well as continue to keep our wage grid as competitive and relevant as possible. So that's why we're recommending a 1% COLA adjustment. That would be across-the-board adjustment. And this will also help to offset some of the changes we've had to make to the wage grid with eliminating steps and adding steps on, which can also cause some wage concerns and wage issues with existing staff. So the 1% COLA was recommended to be across the board, and if there's any questions more about that, either Ken or I can answer.
Yeah, and again, the fiscal impact for this, so a 1% COLA on our payroll population is about $300,000 per year that would affect the tax levy portion. So for the remainder of this year, we'd be looking at about $200,000 of cost. If you want to know where that $200,000 comes from, I laid out our contingency funds could be used to offset that for this year. It's spread out through all of the different departments, so it's a relatively small impact on any one department. Really, I wish I could go higher than 1%. The 7% inflation factor that we have is really actually quite troubling for me, and keeping our wage grid competitive, especially the market conditions in our part of the state right here next to the Twin Cities. But as far as what we can afford to do without digging too deep of a hole for myself for the start of the 2023 budget, conservatively, I think 1% I know we can do. So that's what I'm recommending right now. And then I would like to come back and revisit how we're going to adjust the wage grid and COLA adjustments in 2023 once we have the rest of the 2023 picture figured out. We lost sound again, John. Are we back yet? All right. So how much of that did you guys hear?
I think most of it.
All right.
Yeah, it was just the fact that, you'd like to come back and revisit it. And it made sense to me, Bill, or Ken.
All right. You guys heard enough of me. I got it.
Any discussion on what has been presented?
I do have a quick comment, if I may.
Supervisor Long.
Thank you. I'm obviously concerned about creating a structural deficit and using our contingency funds so early in the year. But at the same time, I think we kind of got caught off guard with the amount of inflation. And when I'm paying $3.50 for a tank or a gallon of gas down here, I think we have to be concerned about that. So, and we're reacting in this way. We're reacting what we can afford to do, and I think that makes sense. So I think we do need to do this.
Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion at this time.
I would move to forward as presented. Prove it.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor Long. Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to our next agenda item of the resolution adjusting wages due to compression. Tara will be presenting.
I will start off, and then I'm sure Ken will weigh in on some other things with this. But we did a statistical analysis to try to identify those areas where we have seen bringing in new people at or above existing staff and/or close to their supervisors. And in doing that, we also did a deeper dive in some of those situations to be able to identify, was there a justification for that? So for instance, we have brought in some people that are at or higher than existing staff, but they came into with us 20 years of experience in the field. So in those cases, that was justified. So we tried to analyze each of those situations, and in doing so, we came up with 43 employees that we are recommending some adjustments to due to the fact that there has been compression over the last several years of having to bring employees in that either had the same amount or even less experience than they did, but they were brought in again at or above the existing staff. Did you want to add anything to that, Ken?
Yeah. Again, just the fiscal impact of this. So we have it here in the background note. Let me get to that. I don't remember this one offhand. Yeah, it was some $100,000. Yeah, wherever I have it in there. So just remember the fiscal impact of this. This is spread out across many departments. A lot of departments have, one or two employees that have, a couple of steps. So I think it's going to be fairly readily absorbed across the departments. So I'm not concerned about any significant budget impacts for the remainder of this year. But again, these decisions create a higher starting point for me for 2023. I just want to make sure I do point that out whenever we're doing this. So when we come back and I start the 2023 budget and I said we already spent all the money, you guys don't ask me when did that happen. I can show you the tape.
And I will add, just another reason to do this is for retention purposes, because the cost of turnover is very costly, and that will cost us more in the long run than doing these steps now to try to retain our existing employees.
Any questions or discussion? Supervisor Cook.
I'm just wondering if our colleagues, other counties in the area are kind of facing the same kind of situations, whether it's the compression or needing to increase the wage grid to get employees like we've just been talking about, and how are they addressing those?
I can tell you they absolutely are. We were actually just on a call this last week with a lot of our counterparts, and they're all facing similar situations. A lot of the counties are doing COLAs, across the board COLAs. I think the majority of counties are. Some of them did steps as well, but my understanding, and I don't have an analysis in front of me, is sometimes their steps are not as large as ours, so they are doing larger COLAs, but that's one way that they're addressing it as well, and trying to be creative with different ways to recruit staff as well. What other type of benefits can they offer? They're doing wage studies, so some of them are doing wage studies like we've done in the past with McGrath Consulting. So it really is not just St. Croix County. We're seeing this all over.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion at this time. Supervisor Peavy,
Yep, so moved.
and a second.
I'll second.
Supervisor Cook. Motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are on to item number 10, consideration of reclassification request, operator foreman to shop superintendent. Tara will be taking this item.
So in speaking with Commissioner Croix, he is asking for this additional higher level supervisory position to be able to help manage the staff in the shop. Someone that's very knowledgeable, that will know if things are being done the right way or not being done the right way, and that can just add that extra layer of leadership. And so he does have a vacant position, and with that position, he's asked to reclassify it into the new position he created, which is the shop superintendent. We do have Assistant Highway Commissioner Todd Raynaud here if you wanted additional questions that I haven't discussed or covered yet, but he is here as well if you have additional questions for him.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move to reclassify the position from operator foreman to shop superintendent.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor Peterson? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11, resolution updating personnel policies. Tara will be presenting.
This is the last time you have to hear me tonight. So we do have 4 policies here. These are the last 4 of this project that you will have to review as part of the project. There's been a total of 91 new and revised policies, so thank you very much for all the time you spent reviewing them. So today with the 4 we have, I'll cover some brief highlights with each of those, and then if you have any questions, obviously happy to answer. So with 2.4, the PTO and LTSB, this was an existing policy that had already been approved, but we did find that we needed to change some of the language. So we removed the hour average from the definition to just go with straight FTE. That was causing some inconsistencies with some of our on-call staff, so we go with straight FTE. And then we just clarified some language around the usage of long-term sick bank hours. And I'll move along. If you want me to stop, please let me know. With 6.7, harassment and discrimination, this was formatting and some language changes. We did add guidelines. We added supervisor and employee responsibilities sections, and then we also added a remedial action and policy enforcement section. Otherwise, the intent of this policy stayed the same as what it previously was. With workplace bullying, again, formatting, changed the definition, added and deleted language, and then replaced some language with similar but more appropriate or explanatory language. I will mention there was a question posed about why we needed to have different policies about harassment and discrimination and workplace bullying, but the EEOC actually describes that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They define harassment as unwelcome verbal or physical behavior that is based on race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, gender identity, nationality, age, physical or mental disability, or genetic information. Bullying refers to anyone. So typically the EEOC is saying that harassment and discrimination is more about protected classes, whereas bullying is anyone. Anyone can be bullied. We have been utilizing Eau Claire's practices around some of these policies because they actually did work with an employment attorney to draft their policies, and so we thought that was a good example of what we should be doing for our own policies. And then the last policy is concerns or complaints. This was one that had already been approved in January's admin, but at the board earlier this month, there was a request to remove one sentence from the additional guidance section, so we did remove that sentence. Otherwise, the policy is as it was in January.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve.
Supervisor Long has moved to approve. Do I have a second? Supervisor Peterson, second. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Let's see. Moving on to item number 12, resolution amending rules and bylaws. And Heather will be presenting.
Thank you very much. This resolution is to amend the rules and bylaws. Currently, the rules and bylaws indicate that the county board, will review them each year and amend every March. The amendments to the rules and bylaws this year are to modify the supervisory districts in Article 1, Section E. With the redistricting after the census, the county is required to update these descriptions. We've also clarified the ending dates for the term of office, and we made that language consistent with Wisconsin Statute 59.10. There was a few formatting changes. We wanted to make sure that Robert's Rules of Order was correctly cited throughout the rules and bylaws. And I would note that Supervisor Leaf has expressed interest in considering staggered county board terms, and pursuant to statute, that would have to be done pursuant to ordinance. That is not a change that is in these rules and bylaws before you today, but that is something that I believe she had expressed interest in previously.
Questions regarding this action? Any discussion? Supervisor Long.
I just wanted to make a comment with all due respect to Supervisor Leaf. I know that we had talked about this change previously, and I thought in a lot of ways it was a good idea, but after we kind of dug into the detail and realized the impact that this would have in terms of reappointing a county chair and with a board chair and committees and the impact it would have, just seems like it would be probably more disruptive than it would be worthwhile. So I guess I would I know it's not included in this, but I would suggest that we not consider making that change along with these bylaw changes.
Supervisor Peterson.
Yeah, I concur with Supervisor Long. We had a lengthy discussion on that, and that was our take on it, and I'm still convinced that that would not be the thing to do. So I would also encourage not addressing it.
Is there any further discussion or comment on staggered terms? All right. Let's move on to the resolution amending the rules and bylaws. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to present them as presented, or approve them as presented.
Supervisor Peterson has made the motion. Is there a second?
I would second.
Supervisor Peavy has seconded. All in favor, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And our final agenda item, resolution updating the ARPA fund uses. This will be presented by Leah.
Thank you. So a little bit ago, U.S. Treasury came out with their final rules for the ARPA funding. And with the new language, they did put in there that we could allocate the first $10 million into lost revenue. If we did not do this, we would have had to do a calculation every single year to calculate that lost revenue. And we did calculate it for the year 2020, and that was about $2.4 million. This way, if we allocated the first $10 million to the lost revenue, this will open up all the different uses that we could use that money for if we move it in there. This would be for reporting purposes only to the government. This would not be actually spending, not allocating the dollars to be spent for the 10 million, just moving it into the lost revenue category for ARPA reporting purposes. And then we would be deciding on, well, you guys would be deciding on how those dollars were spent at a later point in time. We do not have all the dollars yet, but we do anticipate receiving them in May of this year. So this resolution would be just allocating $10 million to lost revenue. And then that opens up the possibilities of those dollars to be spent.
Any questions or comments?
Quick
Supervisor
question. So basically, if I'm understanding this correctly, this basically does provide us still the flexibility to allocate these dollars to the projects that we previously identified.
Correct. So the dollars that were already allocated, that first $8.5 million, that's pretty much all set. We do have to pull back about, I think it's about $200,000 that is out of the second group of dollars that we will be putting towards the 10 million. But yes, all of those dollars that were previously allocated stay there. We do anticipate some of those projects coming in under budget. So then those dollars will then move into the lost revenue.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Supervisor Long. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Second by Supervisor Cook. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And at this time, I will ask or request future agenda items. Supervisor Cook.
Thank you, Supervisor Ard. I would like to request at a future meeting that we talk about the potential creation of a broadband committee. We had the study done earlier this year. We know their recommendations and their proposals, and I just don't want the study to just sit on the shelf. based on the need across the county and just the different stakeholders that potentially could be involved and served. I think we should dedicate a little bit more time to looking at how we can move forward. So I'm requesting we consider talking about creating a broadband committee. I envision it would include county staff and potentially some supervisors and maybe external parties involved, impacted in that area. And there's just so much federal money out there with the IIGA and all the infrastructure funds that are going to be available. I would hate to see the county lose out on those opportunities if it can help us expand access across the county.
Thank you, Supervisor Cook. Any other agenda items? Supervisor Long? No? Okay. I would propose for a future agenda item, looking into a county housing authority, and let's do some exploratory research on what that would look like and if it would be viable or if it is indeed needed and necessary in St. Croix County. Any other additions? Okay. Any announcements or correspondence?
I just want to announce the Committee of the Whole meeting that we scheduled today. County Board Chair Peterson scheduled for March 16th. It's a Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. And that'll be the kickoff for our 2023 budget. So that's where we'll have the department heads come in and give their forecast for what they're seeing for budget pressures for the next year.
Okay. And seeing no others, we will adjourn. It is now 6:12 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for attending.